Anthony, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Jordan. It's always great talking to you, and I'm glad we get to do this and make something we can, like rewatch or just pick out the conversation. I think so often we have conversations and we don't be able to come back. We're not able to come back and grab those nice snippets of things we said. It happens a lot in life, and it's great to have that.
Definitely. Well, and even, just like, I mean, you used to be on the podcast, before it was like a podcast, the Spirit Side chats, and so some people might remember you from those, but yeah, we always used to have these like enlightening conversations, and I'm grateful to have now like a space for a dedicated, hour with you to just get into whatever we want to. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to do this as well. I think, I'll probably explain a bit later. I've been kind of holding back on a lot of things for a lot of time in life. I think when we're in these spiritual realms, you kind of have to hide that from some aspects of your lives with certain people and stuff like that. And now I just don't care anymore. I mean, I really care, so I don't want to do that anymore. Let's talk about anything and everything. I'm happy to go anywhere.
Man, it's so funny you say that, because I recently did a podcast with Elijah Ray. You remember, you know that guy, right? Like his music. And it was so funny. Like I was going into it expecting like, we'll probably talk about music and talk about, art and creativity. And instead it was just like conspiracies, like the whole way. He knows so much on that subject. And like, it was interesting. Like, you were the one who introduced me to the Mind Blown series that got removed from YouTube, but we were able to snag it just like as it was getting taken down from YouTube. For those who haven't seen, for those listening, if you go into Spirit Conspiracies, it's a free module we have inside of Spirit Mysteries. There's this series that is very, very interesting. And Anthony, you were the one who originally posted it on YouTube. And it was very wild to go into, of just like the depth of, it is like a pretty right-wing QAnon kind of stuff, but a lot of it, I think there's a lot of like validity to, or just like the connections that they're making are like, oh crap, like there seems to be something here, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly, yeah. And that was sorry. That was, I'll just say, because that was something that was handed to me by the creator, who doesn't want to be known in any way, and for the reason of just hiding their identity. I'm happy to put that out there. So I offered that service to him, or them, I should say. And there are more as well. There are, like I've explained to you, there are about 5 more. I think they maybe need to be like refined a little bit more, especially the last couple. But yeah, they're on the Spirit Conspiracies site now, which I'm very happy that you've done that, because when you contacted me about it, it was like flags coming up. Oh, this is content that has been taken down because of hate speech, or just weird things. I'm like, why? It just says hate speech, and I'm replying to the thing saying, what is actually bad about it? What don't you like? And nothing. You don't get anything back. And it happened and coincided with lots of other people who had their channels taken down, people who were just showing you how to heal your body, like chiropractors and people like that, being taken down everywhere. It goes down the deep rabbit hole, which I think we're going to start looking towards.
Maybe. I mean, we don't necessarily have to. I mean, you and I first connected. Let's see wherever we end up going. Like, you and I first connected years and years ago, really just through spirit science, and like through, just like the content that I was making, and then you were coming in and like participating, and we were doing these live calls and everything like together. But, it is like, it seems as though with the shifts of 2020, that the subject of conspiracies and the, that darker side of the force has really become, come to the forefront in even like the new age circles. And I mean, like, where for you today, like you're living like in this beautiful meadow in the middle of nowhere or something like that, as far as I could tell, like based on the pictures that you always send me. You're like building a spirit city, on top of a mountain. What is your focus are you focused on this kind of stuff, or is it generally more just like spirit building, life affirming kind of, energy?
Well, for a long time, around the time when we first met, there was so much learning to do with conspiracies, and that was really my focus. I kind of set this plan out for myself whereby throughout my 20s, I would just be learning and taking as much information, and obviously still doing things and still creating and all that sort of stuff. But the focus was on learning. And now that I have turned 30, my focus is now toward building and really putting out there what has been absorbed. So yeah, there was a lot in conspiracies, and I still do learn a lot about that, but I found that it shifted into learning about the sciences and learning about how things work. I really always want to learn what makes things tick, and how the systems that govern the world, govern smaller localities of people, how that all works and interlinks, and then deeper down, how the human body is constructed, how our thoughts create emotions, create our physical body, and then we project that outward and in all sorts of ways. So yeah, right now focused on putting things out and just really letting go. I felt for a long time that I held back on doing that, and I kind of ate myself up a bit about that, beat myself up a bit, especially seeing a lot of other people putting things out, and I'm just, letting it process. It all becomes like a catalyst in the end. This whatever we see as something that we don't like, it can then become a greater lesson. And so I really got some deep lessons from holding fire on a lot of things, and I think it's going to be great in the long run.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have to say, just listening to you, it's like most people, I would commend you if you kind of went into your 20s looking at it like, I'm going to learn for the next 10 years. Most people don't even get that far in terms of a life plan, and then like implement and build it when you're 30. I didn't even, I have a life plan. I feel like I'm shooting from the hip every day instead of like planning out the whole bigger picture structure. Only now, I guess, I'm like through happenstance in the last year, starting to get a much more clearer, like, what are the company's plans, Spirit Studios and stuff, like 5-year, 10-year plan kind of thing. But that didn't come about right away. But you saying, you're learning, you're like, no, my 20s, I was just like learning, like this is my experience. Has been my experience of you for a long time, is like, you were very attentive to all the different perspectives and, being very rounded in your awareness, as opposed to, just like that rigid mindset of like, well, this is the way that things are, period. And I think that's one thing I really appreciate about you.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah. So what are you building though these days? Like, again, because aren't you, it's been a little while since we've really checked in, but last I heard, you were like literally building like a mini spirit town somewhere.
Yeah. So, this is, links into like the manifestation stuff. So after learning how these mechanisms work, or now, rather than just it being like a subconscious synchronicity kind of happening thing, which I'm aware of, it's now like, okay, I'm going to use this as a tool. So I put out there, all right, I want this to happen, I want that to happen, and you pray for it, you focus in on it, you welcome it into your life. And so I started putting out the intention to have the opportunity to build teepees, or like, places to sit in and work, and, like water systems, all that sort of stuff that you would need to set up a community, just like we used to do in like the tribal times. And yeah, very quickly, I think it was like a couple of days after just having that intention, someone pointed out to me, oh, look, someone's left a phone number here, and called them, and they were saying, oh, we have land that you can buy. And it just sort of all started coming from there. People contacting, or I was contacting people. And, this is why it's not just a spiritual thing. It's also, when you start talking about stuff, you start bringing it out in other people, and otherwise the conversation wouldn't happen, right? So I start talking to someone, oh, I've got this idea. Oh, well, I know someone who does that, and I know someone who has this. We end up finding people who have pieces of land where we got kind of like areas to test what we want. We were traveling with another group at this time. So we tested out how to build gravel roads, and how we would put like a foundation down with just earthen materials, and without buying stuff from commercial enterprises. eventually landed on this piece of land in Portugal, which someone was like, yeah, you can just go and do what you want, use the dead trees and the wood and everything, and dig holes and create whatever you want to create. So we went there, and as soon as we got there, pretty much I was like, I'm building a teepee, I'm just putting up a tripod. So I got some trees that were on their way out dying. They'd lost all their leaves and they were in a cluster of other pine trees, so I made sure to select a nice tree that would be of service because it's about to die, and stripped the bark, tied up a knot at the top, set that up, and that just became our kind of little starting point. And yeah, we went on to build a hot tub, but unfortunately at that time things shifted away from, stop focusing on really going for that, because there were things within me and within Rita, my partner, that we needed to assess and kind of get stable with, i.e. the financial stuff. So we had to dial that back and say, okay, we need to build on a foundation if we want to build a foundation. Yeah. So
that's the whole story. I was waiting to hear what the next part was. What?
Okay, all right. The next, I feel like sometimes I'm just talking and talking.
No, you're good.
Right now, thanks. Right now, we've come to another part of Portugal because I'm applying for citizenship. So this is where I was saying we had to dial things back, because now we're really taking care of the way things are going to really be built up. If I'm a citizen of this country, then I can actually own land, or as far as ownership goes, I can, in the guise of the government, have a plot of land and do things with it. I can interact with the system here much better than if I was, like I am now, a foreigner or a non-national. So we're taking care of those things. I'm getting citizenship. I have Portuguese blood, so I am half Portuguese on my mother's side, and yeah, we intend to either go back to that piece of land. We've been invited back by the owner, but there's another place in Spain. There are actually 2 places in Spain we know where they'd be happy to set something up. So yeah, we're building up this whole idea of getting people to come on the pilgrimage, to go from these places where we can set up a little tent camp and have a kind of initiation area to get everybody on the same level, and then move up to, there's the Camino del Rey here, which is the pathway all that leads to the monastery in the northwest of Portugal. And it has walking roads that go through the entire European landscape. It's a very ancient pilgrimage route. So that would be the idea. And we're just working on implementing it and drawing that to us in whatever way possible.
That's cool. It's a testament to, just power of manifestation, of setting your intention and going forward and creating it. And I'm curious too, because, sorry?
You've been having this idea for a long time to make a spirit center. I remember that from back in the California days.
It's still alive within me. And we actually, as of last week, we actually have a specific bank account now that is Spirit Center Savings. And we're actually transferring money into there on a regular basis within the studio to saving up for the Spirit Center, having that dedicated pot. I wanted to ask you also, you for a long time you kind of had your own little business that you guys were running. You were making these meditation cloaks, which were very, very cool. And maybe even other stuff that I wasn't aware of. I thought maybe you were doing wire wraps or something, but is that part of the foundation of your, building the resources foundation, or have you moved on from those?
No, that was, I think that was the first kind of whimsical throw getting that established. And Live Up has really sustained us. It's been just the great passive income that we've then taken chunks of time to invest a lot in. We try and do too much. I'm a musician, I am an artist, to try and do all sorts of different things in life. And now I've had to really hone in and focus on some things. But to go back to that, so we started creating cloaks and cushions. When we both lived in China, teaching English to children, the parents of a student had a company that supplies all the meditation, cushions, robes, other things that you have candles and sorts for the Buddhist monasteries in Southeast China. And so we made friends with them, and they were like, here are some gifts, and they just gave them to us to use. And I was meditating every day with this lovely warm cloak. I thought, this is great. I'm going to see if there's anything like this in the West, like on our eBay and Amazon and stuff. And it's not there. So I thought, wow, this is a great thing to bring over. And I still love the cushions. They're like natural coconut fiber cushions with a linen encasement. We have 2 sets of cloaks now, and this is what I'm trying to say, that we want to move away from some of the things that we feel are not as good for the earth and for everyone, because those polar fleece cloaks are made from that plastic that it makes like a nice fluffy material, and it's very warm.
like a rayon or something like that, or nylon.
I don't know what a rayon is. Yeah.
Oh no, just different kind of fabric. Yeah, like a synthetic fabric. Yeah,
it's like synthetic, exactly. Which was, we rationalized it at the time, saying, well, this is kind of a one-time purchase thing. You would ideally keep this and cherish it, just as we have. But if microfibers start coming off, and it's just something. It's a really small detail if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, but we don't want to be putting something like that out. So I've actually got it here. We've got these linen cloaks now, which are made from a company, or it's Rita's sister and brother's company in Lithuania. It's a very traditional weaving technique, so we're using those now instead and putting that out. So we're shifting into more ethical and just trying to improve whatever we're doing. Yeah,
that's lovely.
So
I remember we had that conversation once before of because we were doing the Money movie and the Money series, and I was going through a lot of leveling up in my own reality about resources and finances and business and spirituality and how they all fit together. And I remember having that conversation with you of like, you were doing so many different things. And I remember just kind of recognizing that and being like, wow. And it's similar for me of like trying to juggle too much and just like honing it in to bring about more success in the one thing that you're really striving to create, kind of thing.
Thank you for that. I really did appreciate the conversation. That was kind of a marker point in recent times that switched things around, and I was like, okay, focus on the crafts and the spiritual, putting the Reiki out and the company, and that's been the focus. That triad has been really the focus recently.
And it's working.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's working. Congratulations.
It is, and we both know, like, a lot of what Jerry says with his, truthonomics and how his whole story has worked. He said a lot of things in that Rhythmia journey that we went on together, which are great. And I know you're spending time with him as kind of like a mentor-student program thing going on, but he's got some great wisdom, and I'm very thankful for that. And I'm very thankful that I have someone I can talk to more regularly who's able to then give me their piece of it as well.
Yeah. Have you done any other plant medicine journey since we went to Rhythmia? Because that was almost 2 years. Was it 2 years ago now? It was probably close.
Yeah, almost exactly 2 years. It was January, wasn't it? So yeah,
of 2019, I think.
I haven't done any more plant medicine ceremonies, but I do. I kind of took a lot more shamanic technique from that. I was already using marijuana for a long time before to do these kind of journeys. So I'd use it as a tool for meditation at first, and then it became something like, okay, I'd have that and then do what we did at Rhythmia, go and get a fire going, get these energetic principles laid out and create a sacred space so that I could then explore my inner depths and reach for new heights of external input.
Yeah. Have any notable lessons coming through recently?
Right now, it's been about the finances and grounding. A lot of there's so many things we can go into. Focusing on one thing though, let's say with catalysts. So with fear, and there's a lot of stuff that's been happening with people's survival right now. For the first time in a long time, many of us have been faced with our mortality in a very real way, because some people on the news and everything's saying to you, watch out, there's this deadly virus that's going to kill you and all this sort of stuff. It's being there are those things going around all the time, to be honest. I mean, influenza season comes around every year, and that does kill a lot of people every year. But there are now, it's being politicized, and so it's been put in the forefront of people's awareness, and it creates a distraction of hide, go inside, disconnect, and I think that brings up a lot of fear. When we go into the conspiracies, I really wanted to say this. With conspiracies, it changed my whole mind state of looking at it, because we look at conspiracies and go, look at these people, they're doing this stuff. Yeah, okay, they are. But we are now contributing a more negative energy to that just by being aware of it. And it all kind of linked in together with a lot of the previous studies I'd done, looking at the way they manipulate people, the way certain self-service entities, negative entities, want to influence others to gain more power. And it's through a control mechanism that, you've heard of, like problem, reaction, solution. It's also like this. There was a guy talking about UFO anti-gravity technology and reverse engineering things. And so they took a group of people, like experts from around the world, who could eventually figure this out. They showed them a CGI video, but at the time they didn't know. They thought that this was a real video. There was a man in a stadium. He strapped a device on, got some switch out, some control mechanism, took off in the air, went on the side, went around the stadium, and then crashed. And they told those experts that this guy figured out how to do it. He knew how to do it. And we've got all his research in his house and all his notebooks. And we need you to reverse engineer what he did and figure it out. And so they all were doing it. And eventually one guy did figure it out by looking at a stick going down a whirlpool in a stream or in a river or a lake or whatever. But the point was that he said that was the illusion. They used that fake scenario to create the belief that it was possible, and then they did it. So you could see that as a positive thing, but you can also do that in a negative way. You can tell people there's this horrible thing happening, make them believe it, get the reaction, and then you match your intention to that reaction, and then that sways populations, that creates a change in people's minds. So we've got to be careful of that. And so awareness, bringing our awareness up. And I want to say, ultimately, let's focus on this conspiracy that it's all good. What if there's a conspiracy that this is something good to move us into a good place,
That's, that was the first approach that we took with, we did 2 Spirit Science coronavirus episodes, like just Spirit Science, just Patchman talking about COVID, because it seemed very timely, seemed very relevant. And that was really the approach we took. And a lot of people really appreciated it, but also a lot of people got really mad because they were like, what are you talking about? This is made in a lab. It was clearly a big, this is a part of this control agenda. So that's around the time we were like, okay, well, we still want to believe and hold the space for our growth and evolution from this. And in that, maybe it's time that we expand the videos that we make. That was sort of how the conspiracy theory of everything was conceived. It was like this new series of like, let's do the dark stuff. Like if people are asking for it, they really want it. And the funniest thing is, it's like, it's not, it's when we made the conspiracy theory of everything, there's so many people who are like, wow, Spirit Science finally woke up. As if we were new to the conversation. Like just because we hadn't talked about it before, obviously must mean that we've never even heard of these things before, or we're just so asleep in the dark. Rather than seeing it as like we're kind of doing our best to like look at everything, but we also recognize that we're steering the global conversation. Like you outlined it very well of like it's the biology of belief. It's Bruce Lipton's thing. It's like exactly. Your paradigm of belief, your belief system will dictate the quality of life and the direction that you go, and the kinds of actions that you'll take too. So if we're focused on, look how terrible everything is, we should rail against it violently. I mean, what are we going to create? More violence, right? So I think that like you're hitting the nail on the head. The way that, we have a responsibility in how we approach these subjects to treat everything as an opportunity for illumination in order to be the embodiment of the change that we want to see in the world. Because otherwise, when we're so stimulated by fear and hate and anger and frustration and all these things, then we're really operating from a very limited dimension of consciousness, and we're very easily manipulatable in that state, right? Like it's you can see the whole like problem solution very clearly of like, oh no, look, there's a virus, here's a solution, we have a vaccine. It's not necessary. You don't
Very quick.
What's that?
Like how quickly the vaccine has come to, or nearly at market now, they say, where something like that would take 5 to 10 years to really get through the trials.
Potentially so. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, look, because as we've looked at both in like, as you know, in the Mind Blown series and in conspiracy series, as well as just our conversation here and otherwise, it's just like there's so much that seems out of place to take the story at face value. And even in this other podcast I was telling you about with Elijah Ray, he was like describing, you know, like the kind of like the public dissonance that is created, specifically like the confusion that's created to stir up confusion within people. Like, you know, there's what's his name, Dr. Anthony Fauci, you know, the lead medical guy, virus lab guy. In this video, he's like, people should not be wearing masks. And in this video, everyone should wear a mask, you know? And it's like, what?
And you see this time and time again. The same thing was happening in England, actually, with that whole, saying one thing and saying the complete opposite at different times. The elected I can't remember if he was really elected, because since Theresa May came in, there's been this whole wave of kind of non-elected officials that have been in office. But he was saying, go to school, but don't go to school unless you have to go to the shops, or don't go to the shops, and all that sort of stuff. It was like left and right. And I think, like you said, and like Elijah Ray said in that talk, that it's creating confusion, and you're creating like a wedge between people's the direction people take or want to believe, and then it's creating like micro conflicts. Everyone's having this side on whether you should wear a mask or not, but that's not the real issue. Where is this all stemming from? We should always go back to the stem or the root cause of where all this is coming from. And this is why I believe that you could see how this whole epidemic has been a good thing, because now so many people, yes, they've been focused on fear and survival and stuff, but so many people are now cleaning up, really like making sure their houses are clean, making sure that they themselves are clean, being wary of contact. You shake someone's hand, you don't know what they've been touching, and all that sort of stuff is now kind of taken a new precedent in our minds. And I think to avoid a lot of illness, that's a really good thing. So we don't know, it could be that there are people who are in their cults and religious occult areas of life saying, oh, well, look, we're going to have really big problems if we don't address that issue. So it's going to be harsh, but let's put out this fake epidemic and then people might wake up a bit more. I'm not saying that's what's happening at all. And obviously there are people doing horrible things, with the series we've put out and talked about things recently. We know that, or we can see that. There's evidence of it. But I always want to make a case for the positive side. And I think just as we can look at all this negativity and these people doing the service to self, darkness, creating the pyramid, there are always going to be balance. There's going to be balance. And so I'm sure there are people who are doing the good thing, and let's join up with that. I think there's maybe just as many of us as there are of them. And it's just who's going to put their message out and who's going to really lead in that direction, in the direction polarization.
Yeah. So where do you see then, like this whole thing going? This is a conversation a question I've asked several of my podcast guests now, is like where, it's like over the next year, 2, 5, 10, Jerry, we I don't know if you saw in the, we made a video about a year ago called The Secrets of Spiritual Business. It was like an interview with him. He said that this was the decade of the shift, or this would be known in the future as the decade of the shift. And we're like, Off to a great start, Jerry. I mean, you called it there. But like, where do you see this whole thing going? You know, maybe on both sides, or how do they merge, or what? Like, where's this going from your vantage point?
I believe ultimately it's going in a positive direction. I think there's no other way when you look at our history of, you know, we've had so much compression, we've had so much inward introspection and division, chaos, that we will shift into a new order, and that this is where like things can get a bit twisted because people can construct that order. But I ultimately think we will wake up more. We're going to start seeing how we have this interaction with the energy field that's ever present that we have just not realized that is there. You know, we are like channeling energy all the time. We're channeling this cosmic energy, we're grounding it to earth, we're receiving energy from the earth. You know, even this new documentary that's come out about grounding shows the science of that. And I think we're shifting into a place that is of a higher awareness, higher density, higher vibration. I'm going to say that I believe that our reality here will be merged with the dream world, and that is ultimately what 4D positive and 4D negative is. We are like in 3D, and everyone says we're going to 5D, and we're kind of shifting, but 4D, we're already here. We've been here for a long time. We've been slowly encroaching into that area, and it is the dream world. It's where time space meets space time. This is the space time continuum. Time moves linear, and we can explore space. And in our dreams, have you noticed how it seems that time doesn't really matter because you can be in the past, present, future? But when you look at something and turn, the space has to change for the dream to progress. And usually when you turn back to the space, it's not the same, something's changed. And I believe that those worlds are going to blend together. We're entering what's known as the age of Aquarius, and that's been talked about since the 60s, but now we're actually moving into that. Where from December 20th, there's a mass meditation event on December 20th, by the way. Everyone should take part in that and welcome these new energies that will be coming into us. Our solar system is moving into a part of the universe, a part of this galaxy that has very high fluctuations of energy, and we are going to start downloading that. We're going to start receiving that. So welcome that in, channel it down. And I think from that point on, throughout this, 5, 10 years, 20 years, who knows, probably hundreds of years, we're going to be shifting through. We're going to be moving into that space. So our awareness is going to spike. We're going to receive a lot of crazy new sensory input, and we're going to have to choose what that means. We're going to have to assign belief to it. So that's why we should really connect with those who want to be of service to us and not of service to themselves, because then they'll seek to put you under them.
Right. So I'm very curious then to ask you then, kind of following up in this, is like, do you think there's any concern, from the perspective, because this is even like the dimensional shift, this moving to 4D, 5D is something that we've talked a lot about on Spirit Science before, but it seems as though even mirroring that with the biology of belief is like, if collectively people hold a belief of, density, material existence is all that there is, then they continue to create that, they continue to perceive that that is the reality that they live in. And while there are people who are talking about this and waking up to this, higher consciousness, and that's kind of often the big question that I have to frame is, is it that we're physically moving into a higher frequency where our bodies are no longer as solid, we're more in a dream time? Or is it where we're remaining physical, but our consciousness is expanding? We're becoming psychic. We're becoming able to, kind of like Doctor Strange, peering into different future timelines, with a more, it's kind of like you're more on a plant medicine all the time. Just your natural state is like more psychic, more interconnected in that way. And if there's, existing systems and existing paradigms that are manipulating the mass consciousness, do you find that there's any concern of, just the next cycle being maybe a little bit similar, different completely, but similar to the past one, where there's still this, kind of these like tendrils of control that reach out and are influencing billions of people around the world that kind of like keep us tethered to a more denser state of consciousness?
So I think that we should be wary of this movement towards AI and the like the holographic illusion of life that we can create with inside computers, because let's say in a shift to a new level of consciousness, there are like prerequisites in the way that, okay, so everyone can share ideas instantaneously. It's moving towards collective consciousness, in effect, that we will be able to access each other's skills and memories, feel each other's emotions, just connect more deeply. And it's already happening. You just need to be sensitive and tuned, and that's happening. Like anyone who's taken plant medicine knows what I'm talking about, and maybe even if you had mushrooms or something severe like that, but it's much more wild and chaotic and hard to make sense of. So I think that, let's say if that's like a prerequisite for the shift, if you want to control that or like hide it, you can still step into that yourself, but then give a distraction that mimics it, is an illusion of it to the people. And then thereby you cut off the interest or the belief that it's even there. And when that happens, it's like out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see it, you're not thinking about it. You need to think about it to have that energy and belief system penetrate your mind to then become real and experience it in the outside world. So whether or not, obviously I can't say for sure anything that's in the future, because we're all consciously creating, and all we can do is work with probabilities. And I think that's what a lot of people are able to do on an individual level. The cabal, or this group of people who are working together in the occult ways, are using technology and using individuals that they may be trapped or in prison, to use those psychic abilities and things like that to further the agenda, to look and get the edge. As long as you can stay ahead of the others, you can lead the direction. It's like being at the front of a flock of birds. You steer. So that's the idea of the negative polarity, creating this group at the top that leads everything from down below. But I really always want to move away from that and say that there's always unlimited possibility. Even at the moment when the control is looming and we're seconds away from doomsday or something like that, where on the other side of that it's like a whole new world, we can always have the chance to change it. There's always the chance, always. Even after it's happened, that it's like a bubbling. It will bubble up. And right now, all of us as spiritual beings are bubbling up. This conversation is happening, everywhere. People are starting to do things. People are starting to interact with their spiritual gifts and lessons. And so as we rise, we can burst through into a new area, or like what's happened before, it can be squashed down again, and the pressure, the crystallization will still happen at that point, and it will rise again in a new and more explosive manner. But right now we need to focus on letting that which has already risen blossom and bloom, and let the other stuff fade away, join in harmony to support it, rather than create another division. That's not what it's about.
Yeah. I think that I feel as though what you're describing is like, it's necessary and important, because we do have to observe both sides, but often it gets so difficult to pull yourself out of that, looking at the dark side. And this is where, even with our conspiracy audience, the people who are more interested in the conspiracy theory of everything, and like the comments that we get inside of the Spirit Conspiracies module and Spirit Mysteries, it's just an entirely different crowd than the more transcendent awakening audience, and there is an overlap, obviously, of course, but it's a very different kind of people who are watching and getting like really fired up about these horrible things that are going on in the world, or this horrible direction, or seeming the vibe of the imposed control and everything like that. And I completely understand, and I feel like what you're speaking to like bringing in the, you know, that hope and that faith in something greater is what allows for that to happen. Because if you're hopeless, if you're in despair, then you're really at the mercy of whoever is, you know, inflicting the power. But when you're living with that hope, that faith, that trust, that, you know, striving for something more, it puts you on a path to make it happen. And I especially love, like, this is something I've talked about a lot, and it's going to be part of the finale of the Conspiracy Theory of Everything. But it's the, you know, the ascension conversation that, like, are you familiar with the 4-minute mile?
Aha, I listened to this just this morning. Carry on,
Yeah. So, I mean, for those who are, you know, tuning in and don't know, like, the 4-minute mile is basically that for up until like almost all of recorded human history, there was this belief that it was impossible for a human to run a mile in only 4 minutes or less. It was just an impossibility. It couldn't happen. And so it never did. And then all of a sudden, there's this, I forget his name, Robert something, I think, in the 1960s or 70s, ran the 4-minute. He did it. He broke the record. And suddenly the belief system was shattered, and all over the world, it's just like popping off like lightning. All of a sudden, people could just do it because there was this belief and this awareness that you can. And I feel as though it's, you know, it's the same thing with this ascension thing. It's like, if one person, all it would take is one person to learn a supernormal ability, whether it's and publicly demonstrate it, right? Like if it's they learn to levitate, or they can, you know, like light telekinesis. You know, I can lift up this object with my hand, with my mind, or something that's like out of the ordinary, but demonstratable enough that's like, you know, water bending. Someone who learns to be a waterbender. It would only take one person for suddenly, like, the doors of possibility would just explode across all of humankind. And I feel like you'd look outside, it would suddenly look like the X-Men. You know, like there'd be people with new abilities coming out just rapidly, because now they're looking for it. People are searching, how can I attain to these powers within me, right? And a new era would begin, and it would be very interesting, I think, for all of us.
That new era is beginning. I will say, let's talk about this right now. I want to say to everyone who's watching, and to you, you can fly, you can do telekinesis, you can do whatever you can fathom, right? It's possible. And I'm going to say right now, I've done telekinesis before. I've seen it done. It's possible. It really is possible. And it's a muscle. You have to develop it. It's something you have to do. There is someone who is doing this stuff, and his name is Michael Monk. If you look at this guy, I don't know why it's saying with this whole censorship thing, it's been taken down, a lot of it, but you can still find videos. I've seen him do, he ultimately channels the same lessons that you learn from like Qigong and Reiki practices. Once you are sensitive to energy, you can create an internal vibration. Once you can create that internal vibration, you learn to project it. So he's shown like emanating ripples through the water, manipulating the current of the wind, like, you know, moving something in, like a flag, you know, moving it in the direction that he chooses. He's healed people with hands-on, releasing blockages, like someone who had a speech impediment has had that completely removed in seconds. And he's done so many things, and he teaches it all. AvatarEnergyMastery.com, bioluminology.com. Avatar Energy Mastery, I think, might still be up, but bioluminology.com has been taken down. And when I was looking at all of these things being taken down off the internet on Google, there was when you search bioluminology.com, it was like hate speech and putting lots of profane words out there to trigger people. And I don't know why that was there, but now the website's gone. And I've sent emails to the contact emails because I was a student on both those websites. I can't find it anymore. So if anyone's out there who knows Michael Monk, where is Michael Monk? Please find him. I don't know where he's gone. Something's happened, but it's possible, and it's happened already. Let's get it out there.
Yeah. I wrote all of those down. I'm going to look them up after. I'm also, I made the note right next to Elijah Wright told me about. I'll have to pass this back to you as Tartarian. Are you familiar with Tartaria? This is like
no.
The evidence of a lost civilization that is not all that old. Like only a few hundred years ago, Tartaria, a place called Tartaria, was all over the world maps, and were like removed from history in the last 200 years or so. And they're like just like advanced technology, free energy, like this kind of like Atlantis, but was around recently. And we're in like a different timeline than we think we are. And I just you can make a note for yourself on that one, but that's fascinating. Michael Monk, like just Monk, his last name, like that's that how you spell it? Amazing.
It sounds, yeah. And Tartaria, like a tart, and then ERIA.
ARIA. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right,
yeah. Very, very interesting. The stuff that's coming up and coming through right now. And honestly, like this censorship thing is like not foreign to me as well. Interestingly, in the last sometime in the last year, Spirit Science 19. Wait, was it 9? No, 23 maybe. I don't remember. No. It was 19. Yeah, it was 19. I think it was the one called Cosmic Connections, or Everything is Connected. It's basically this whole, 12-minute video about how science and spirituality are unified. It was just like kind of like a universal spirit science episode, basically. And that one was flagged from YouTube for being unfit for children. And so they age restricted it to 18 plus or 21 plus or something like that. And that was weird to me because there's nothing that's, there's no hate, there's nothing cruel, there's nothing adult, there's no adult content, there's no violence or any language that, Patchman never swears. I swear, Patchman doesn't swear. But and it was weird. And then also very recently, we made an episode about the Hollow Earth theory, because we're like, flat Earth gets so much attention, we should talk about the other side of it. Like, what if the Earth is hollow? And we just did a whole episode about the mysterious, conspiracy theories, if you will, or the theories about Hollow Earth. That one was flagged for hate speech, and we were very confused as to why. And the only theory that we have right now as to why, other than, someone at YouTube just went, I don't like that, and they just, wanted to silence it or something. The possibilities that we mentioned Hitler and there was one of the journals about, of James Admiral Byrd, who supposedly went to Hollow Earth, right? Wrote about how he met these beings in Agartha who had blonde hair and blue eyes. So we thought maybe people or someone at YouTube might have seen that and went oh, well, this is clearly a Nazi propaganda. And we're like, we are just reporting on the journal, but that was enough, I guess. It was weird though. We have noticed some, and the conspiracy theory of everything, of course, 3 or 4 of those episodes have been demonetized and almost taken down and this and that. So it's crazy. The landscape, the internet landscape, 10 years ago, this was unheard of, and now you upload a video to YouTube and every little bit of it is scanned and recorded and measured against the AI if this is something that needs to be looked at. It's crazy.
Yeah, there are a lot of people now, as you're doing, creating their own platforms to move away from the mainstream ones, the one owned by Google. And Brian Rose has done London Real. He's a controversial guy, but anyway, that's happened. There are other people creating their own platforms. I think there's BitChute, which I originally moved the first mind-blowing episode that got flagged onto that one.
Yeah.
And there's minds.com for anyone who wants to move away from something like Facebook. Yeah, there's minds.com. Lots of new sites that are coming out. And
Spirit Mysteries.
Yeah, go to spiritmysteries.com. I've signed up to that, and I love it. I love that there were more, because I was looking on YouTube and it ended, and I was like, oh no, I want to watch more. And then there were 4 more episodes out in advance on the direct website link. So yeah, I love that. And there's loads more kind of bits to read on there. It's extended cuts of things. Mm-hmm. And you said that is the Mind Blown under a different title there, isn't it? It's got a different
No, it's still called
name.
Still called Mind Blown. It's just less focused on the rest, like, because your original title was like Trump 2020 or something like that.
Oh yeah,
And so we changed that because it was like, I as much as yeah, totally, as much as the, you know, the like the conspiracy theories I feel have a lot of validity, I don't want to use them to push any particular agenda or support other agendas other than the illumination of our consciousness. So even like as far as the whole Trump thing goes, like when I listen to him, it's the same thing, but on the opposite, it's the opposite of listening to any other politician. I'm like, what are you even saying? You know, half the time. So I don't know, like when I look at the big thing, it like the whole big picture, it seems to me, and this is just my, you know, present moment, like, because a lot of people are like, Trump is the, you know, time traveling hero come to save us all. And even that feels like a stretch to me. Like, I don't know. I can't say that I'm inside their inner circle, of course, or anything like that. But as much as it feels like if there is a benevolent force working behind the scenes, then they'd be working through Trump, but it's not him specifically. But also that, you know, it seems as though that there's this other paradigm that exists that is sort of disconnected from our mainstream world, and they're fighting for power. And that like the Trump versus Biden, or the, you know, the left wing versus right wing, is just like another dimension of power struggle between two other forces that are maybe mildly, one is mildly better or mildly worse than each other, but neither of them are really fighting for the, you know, the liberation of the human spirit. And that's something that we have to create within our world. So that's kind of what I get out of that whole thing. So I think it's very fascinating, but I didn't want to like use that to be like, yeah, Trump, you know, because then you're just creating so much divisiveness, and like, who the hell knows? I mean, they both kind of seem crazy.
The title only came from the relevancy of everyone really going off about Trump at the time, and it was used as because there's so much. There were so many things out there about how, oh, he's saying this and saying that. Basically, a lot of out of context clips were being shown, and a lot of hate was promoted off of that. So these clips are a collection of clips that show, well, actually, he's not just this stupid guy who's, you know, a bigot and misogynist and all that stuff. He's actually doing something for the American people and trying to do something for the collective community that is of a more positive nature that's not being shown at all.
That's true.
So that's why it was there. But I think ultimately this is a really trivial subject in the way of the grand scheme of things. And just like you said, I want to go back to what you put at the end. It's about the individual right now. It's about us. We need to look more within rather than these little headlines that come up on
looking
TV.
For these people to save us or something. Well, that's the part that really does stand out to me as weird, that I'm surprised that more people aren't willing to talk about, or at least I've seen that. Like, I posted a video about voter fraud on YouTube that I shared a YouTube video on Facebook, and it was, even then, it was very divisive. Some people were like, thank you for sharing. This is very interesting. Other people like, how dare you support Trump? I'm like, I'm not trying to support Trump with this video. I just think this is interesting. But there really does seem to be this like very clear, like if you watch any news at all, that's mainstream. It's like they will not say one nice thing about anything that the Trump administration or anything like that ever did, anything that was beneficial, anything that was good. And they would say it's because he didn't do anything that was really positive, right? Even though there are reported cases of more pedophiles being locked up than ever before, and things like that kind of stand out. And it's like, oh, that's interesting, right? But it's weird, like, to see how much just like of a clear cut, like you can tell it's like it's as if the whole mainstream media says, we hate this guy and we're going to let everybody know, and we're going to tell it like it's the truth and the definitive truth and the only truth. And if you disagree, you're crazy too. And it like wraps everybody into this like mindset of like leaning into Well, either one, questioning, or more commonly, I believe, is probably, like people leaning more further into he must be insane then because the news told me so.
It's shaped a lot of people's opinions about the guy. I think again, it's another mechanism that's driving a wedge between people, and I believe, this is just my personal opinion, that to do with the artificial intelligence tracking that's now going on, and all of this stuff, like we've seen things been taken down, voice recognition software, and all this stuff is implemented now, and everything's collected and filed through automatically. So I believe that it's like an identification system where we're now seeing a lot of people being identified on their beliefs and where they stand, left, right, or conspiracy theorist, or are you passive, do you do nothing? I think that's all being catalogued, and we'll see as this agenda tries to move forward. I think we're going to stop this agenda, but that's the plan, is to then have people identified, put into a group, and then we're already seeing with the algorithms, people's emotions are manipulated to lead to a reaction, to lead to an action. I mean,
yeah, it's crazy.
We should move you to conscious control. It's no matter what anyone says, you should really take it in, and that's the message of spirit science, isn't it? Whatever you see here, don't believe it or disbelieve it. Have your own experience and come to your own conclusions. That's what it's about.
Reclaim your sovereignty, I think, is a really potent term that we can use. That it's when we just, I mean, I've already said this before, I think, but it's just when we rigidly identify ourselves with a belief that was given to us by someone else, we give up our ability to think creatively, with our own unique thoughts. We give up our ability to have our own thoughts, or even to entertain, if we're not our thoughts and they're all just existing in a big field. And at the very least, we give up if you're saying, I only believe in this and I'm only thinking of this, then there's an entire other giant spectrum of thought that you limit yourself from even being able to think. So that like open-mindedness, I mean, it's not just important, it's crucial for the evolution of our consciousness.
And just as you said earlier, with the conspiracy crowd being a bit more like heated, I guess.
Rough edges, rough around the edges.
It's a chaotic mind state, and it, just as I said, when I started looking at these things, 15 years ago now, or nearly 20 years ago, it was a chaotic energy. It needs to happen, just like in that film Network, and they reference it in the Zeitgeist movie. You need to get mad. You need to get fucking crazy and say, I'm not having this and I want to change. You need to have that violent burst of energy to get it out. Otherwise it's being trapped in, and a lot of people have put that aside, put their creative energy aside, put their inner child aside, because I needed to grow up and get a real job and do life like a robot, because they told me, and they said, if you don't do it, then So fear puts that in a box. When that gets let out, it creates a chaotic energy. So we learn to wield that emotion, direct it somewhere that's positive. Don't let this become something that creates more chaos. And when those emotions get settled, they fall into place, you're then able to use them in appropriate times. And I think at first we'll see a lot of people come to that realization that, okay, there are people doing these satanic rituals, they're raping babies, they're killing and consuming their remains, and this stuff is being put in your vaccinations and all that sort of stuff, right? So we're going to learn a lot of this dark, sinister stuff, and you've got to realize it's part of the human consciousness. We have this in our energy field. It's a sickness and it needs to go. And we process it, we move through it. When we take in something, when we're aware of it, we're able to transmute it. And we say, all right, thank you for showing me how dark it can get. I now know what I don't want. And that's appreciated. Let's move on and shift into something that we do want. I really don't want to appear like heartless to the horrible things that are happening, because I've suffered internally. I have felt the trauma when I empathize with these beings that have gone through these painful things, and it's horrible, it's horrific, it's going to make you feel like shit, to be honest. And that's a part of the human experience. We've got to learn to take that in, let go, and ultimately empathize with the people who are doing this stuff, so we can change the way in which we educate. It's the education that leads to people who believe that sort of stuff is acceptable or would go into it, you know? It's a conception with spirituality, ultimately.
It's interesting. There was a time, one of the times that I went to Rhythmia, where, on the medicine, I think it was the last night, it was like everything had built up to this moment. It was like one of the, not the most, maybe the second most painful purgings that I ever had. And I was head in the bucket for a long time. And what I was purging was not even me. I was purging it was not of me. It had nothing, it for all intents and purposes, didn't have anything to do with me. It was like I was helping abused women heal from, sexual assault that, in Hollywood, like of all things. Like, it was something that I had only learned about in the like days before this particular ceremony, just through kind of a happenstance, I suppose you could say. But like, I learned about this, and then somehow that energy, like, it needed to be healed, or there was some healing that there was obviously a lot of healing that needed to happen. But the next thing you know, like, I'm in the ceremony kind of like having this really horrific purging that's just coming through me. And I mean, it shows, like, I think it shows like the power of the connection that we have with each other. And even if it, if we have the ability to heal not just our own stuff, but like stand in service for someone else who's going through something, or we can heal things, psychically, like through our body, connected with them. There might even be some possibility here that we could use tools like plant medicine and other, of course, meditations and stuff to help purify those who are so far down that like dark path that they would never consider even taking a plant medicine. Like, there might be some kind of healing that we could do that can shift those paradigms or change their vibration in some way through us, that at the very least, maybe it would just like create like a dichotomy of like the light versus dark. Like, if there's like a dark lord, then like the servant of light will appear in the contrast, but I don't know. That was a very powerful experience. And this conversation here is just making me wonder, like, what is the depth of, like, I mean, we know that we're completely connected to everybody and everything on the planet. So what level of healing might we be able to do, even for those who are, maybe normally you wouldn't necessarily want to have anything to do with them because they're riding on that, it's Emperor Palpatine kind of thing.
Yeah, so what would happen if Emperor Palpatine walked into a spirit ceremony and you needed to heal that?
Yeah, he's like, I need some healing right now. Give me the medicine. You get the shaman, and shaman's like, you're going to need more. You're going to need more.
Like the whole bucket.
Just drink, just yeah.
Save in it.
Here's a gourd of ayahuasca. Have fun.
I think if someone who had a really deep anchored dark or distorted, I say it's distorted because all comes from love and light, and we just experience distortions of that, and someone who's distorted in this way where they believe they can exert control, manipulation on others and take from others for their own pleasure even, then a plant medicine is a great way to completely radically shift the energy field and the mind state, the subconscious mind, which is connected to the energy field through emotions and things like that. We can shift it into a different place. And if there are lots of lighter oriented people who are surrounding that and they're facilitating that shift, then they can experience a radically different sphere of opportunity and experience than they have been, because they've been led into that little compressed dark corner, right, of in spiritual energetic sense. And then what's going to be very important is the integration. And we all know that anyone who's taken plant medicine, the integration process is vitally important, because you're able to, it's like, I kind of see it like, you know when you like have those fighting games, you have like a bar and you get hit, and then it's like there's a red bar which slowly comes down, you know, and you can heal up to that point if you don't get hit again, and that sort of stuff, right? So I feel like
right.
that sort of, you get boom, you get thrown a million miles away, and then you have that out there experience, and the more you can shift yourself close to it before it comes too far back, you get more reward from it. You can ignore it and you won't really get much out of it. But if you really focus in, you can stay there, and that's what it's about. It's about moving there with a Mother Aya holding your hand and being able to stay there and return there. I think that we could do that with someone, and it's been done. There's Professor David Nutt, the Imperial Research Centre of London and in Cardiff, have been doing these experiments with MDMA, psilocybin. I'm not sure if they're doing DMT, LSD. I was part of one of the LSD trials actually, and they're experimenting with how these substances affect people with PTSD, or what they can do for people with PTSD.
Right.
So so psychoactive substance, I think, can do that for people and really help people that way. And it's all about facilitating that effectively with a trained shaman. You know, you just give someone like a dose of LSD or mushrooms, and like we saw in the 60s or whatever, people go out and do crazy things and try and jump off buildings, or believe that their hot dog is trying to eat them, and, you know, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, you hear a lot of stories like that, but I don't know that many of them are really true. Like there are ones that I do believe, like even like the MK Ultra stuff, where, you know, they just would administer people randomly without them even knowing, with like dosing them with LSD in their coffee or something like that. And then, you know, there's a story about, I think it was a general, we actually covered it in Conspiracy Theory of Everything, I think part 5, where there's this like, you know, lieutenant or general or commander or whatever, who's like tripping out, and he's running down the street, seeing like a demon in every like reflection of like a car window or whatever that he sees. And I do believe that there is some truth to that. And I know that it's very easy to like, you know, trip balls and like lose yourself and like see the crazy things on like while you're tripping. But also I think that there's a lot of that, like, you know, a lot of that is propaganda that came about from the 60s in order to shut it down. You know, like after it was exploding with popularity, like because it was really, you know, a game changer for human consciousness. There was like this, no, that we don't, that's bad. That's very bad. And even though afterwards, like LSD was vindicated, you know, or it was, the truth came out, it was not nearly as loud as the voice that, you know, shut it down in the first place. And so, you know, it was put to rest and stayed there for a very long time. But it's really wonderful to see that it's, you know, making the mainstream conversation again. The challenge I see with it is that it looks like that, you know, there's this intention to really control it heavily, but I don't know that that's going to succeed. I mean, like, you know, Colorado already, you know, decriminalized magic mushrooms. You can get, they're legal basically. I don't know that you can buy them in the store, but you know, you can have them and grow them. And I don't think there's an issue, but you know, even in Canada, like we legalized cannabis, and it looks like they're, you know, wanting to do something similar with the other forms of medicine. The challenge is like, this will be heavily, you know, restricted, only used by psychologists in order to, you know, help people with their depression or anxiety or whatever. And that really limits the scope of what you can do with them, because like you've been there, we've seen what happens when you do it in a ceremony, like at Rhythmia, or at, you know, in a sacred ceremony, as opposed to I'm lying on a couch talking to my doctor, you know. Yeah. Both valid, like, not that we should not also use it for therapy, but that shouldn't be the only. I feel like there needs to be a letting go of the restrictions and the controls, you know, a little bit. But of course that's the opposite of what the powers that be are playing. Yeah,
it's putting a leash on it ultimately, isn't it? And then you can direct because the setting is very important. And yeah, if you can direct it to help, it's the same routine that gets done with a lot of things. Find a reason where people can relate to it and say, oh, this is a good thing, we're going to help people. And then you kind of can shift it towards a different agenda. And that, that we're going through a lot of ups and downs with a lot of stuff. I think anything to find its balance has to go to like polar ends of the spectrum, right? It has to be expressed in its most negative and most positive. We're just looking at, like, as a collective with these medicines. Now ayahuasca is going to be a very key thing, because this has been used by people in the jungle for thousands of years. The native tribes and ancestry that's behind it is immense. And now the Western people have found it, and and it's coming more mainstream. And we are going to need to be careful with how we introduce that to a lot of people, because there will be like party goers who want to just trip out and see aliens or whatever. But that's kind of, you say, like, that's not really what it's for. That will happen when you're ready, or once you start doing your own inner healing. And again, we need to look within ourselves. We need to heal ourselves, and then we can move outwards. We need to build on a strong foundation. And yeah, move forward with that. Yeah,
definitely. Man, so we've gone a little bit over an hour here, and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine, because this has been fabulous. But my final question for you here is, like, in the spirit of bringing everything to a head, it's my favorite question to ask at the end now, is like, if you could take everything that is, moving through you, and both within this conversation and also relevant in your life, relevant for the world, you had one way that you could maybe compress that into an expression for the world, what would it be? What would you say?
Okay, I would say that within me and within you, we are the same. We are connected to everything. All is love and all is light. And we are just receiving different expressions of that. We're growing towards the light. And so let's be of service to others, because by being of service to everyone and everything that we perceive around us, we are in turn helping ourselves, because we are all part of that. And so I urge anyone who's in this spiritual realm, get out there, talk to people. I'm going out on a limb talking about this sort of stuff now. I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff, putting out a lot of things. Like, we're doing so many things to let our energy out there. And so please do that yourself. Please connect and talk to people. Just share the love. Really connect heart to heart with anyone you know. And love will save the day.
Beautiful. Mr. Anthony, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show again and sharing your wisdom, sharing your vantage point of the world. I think it's a very important one. And I know that a lot of the listeners, myself included, very much appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Jordan. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I
Definitely. All right, man. Well, have a beautiful day. And everyone, thanks for listening in.